July 2026. One of Russia's most devastating aerial assets, the Sukhoi Su-24M supersonic tactical bomber, is preparing for takeoff from Saky Air Base on the western coast of Crimea. Equipped with a full payload of precision-guided smart munitions, this single plane has the potential to wreak havoc on Ukrainian towns and cities, leaving nothing but death and destruction in its wake. What Russia doesn't know yet, however, is that this particular plane is never going to leave the tarmac again, because two Ukrainian AI-powered strike drones are headed straight for it and are only moments away from making impact. These drones aren't being piloted by conventional operators either. They're being controlled by the best of the best, elite combat divers, who have made a treacherous journey deep behind enemy lines and into occupied territory in order to find and eliminate this multi-million-dollar plane and prevent it from ever claiming another Ukrainian life. They spent weeks building up to this exact moment. Weeks of stealthy surveillance and risky preparation are about to end in explosive fashion. It sounds like the script from a big-budget Hollywood blockbuster, but this is the true, insane story of how a team of Ukrainian super soldiers took out one of Russia's top tactical bombers. Chapter 1: The Beginning of the End. Saky Air Base is situated near the small coastal settlement of Novofedorivka in Crimea. Its history dates back almost a century. The Nazis built runways here during World War II, and some of history's most famous faces, like Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, touched down at Saky towards the latter stages of the conflict. Fast forward to the modern day, and Saky has become one of the most valuable strategic sites for the Russian military. Time and time again, bombers and fighter jets have taken off from this location to drop bombs and launch missiles against targets across southern Ukraine. The Russians have repeatedly exploited their control of Crimea to rain fire across other areas of Ukrainian territory. But in the summer of 2026, the tables turned. Ukraine launched its now iconic Middle Strike campaign, using drones and missiles to bombard the land corridor linking Crimea to the Russian mainland. It also targeted sites across the peninsula, eliminating air defenses, command posts, and logistical nodes to drastically reduce Russia's ability to project power from the occupied territory. Saky was one of those sites, and on June 24th, its month of fire officially began. The Ukrainian Security Service, SBU, combined forces with Kyiv's Alpha Special Operations Unit to orchestrate a devastating attack on the airbase. They launched a swarm of one-way strike drones into the air, which swiftly sped towards Saky and other Crimean targets, including the Gvardiiska military airfield and the Kerch Strait, the narrow waterway linking Crimea to Russia's Krasnodar Krai. There was once a time when these drones would easily have been eliminated by Russian air defenses, but that is no longer the case. Ukraine has steadily eroded Crimea's shield over time, taking out the likes of radar stations, Pantsir air defense systems, and S-400 missile batteries, transforming what was once one of the best protected pieces of Vladimir Putin's empire into a soft and straightforward target. Their drones soar through the air virtually unopposed. Russia's remaining defenses are too slow and too few to do anything about them as they close in on Saky's location. Their targets, 4 aircraft hangars, used to store and secure the jets and bombers Russia has relied on to sow chaos across Ukraine for years. There's nothing the Kremlin's forces can do but watch the devastation unfold as the drones meet their targets in a blaze of fury and flame and smoke. All 4 hangars are hit. Their weak walls give way under the weight of the drone explosions, causing untold damage to any aircraft hidden away within. In the blink of an eye, one of Russia's most prized military sites has become a blazing inferno, and this is just the beginning. Saky is about to experience the same sort of hell that Russia has forced Ukrainians to endure since 2022, and some of Ukraine's most elite units are already planning an even bigger mission, one that will guarantee the total elimination of one of the enemy's most important pieces of equipment. Chapter 2: The Follow-Up Attack. July 1st, 2026. Barely a week has gone by since the previous attack. Fires have just about been extinguished at Saky's aircraft hangars. The thick plumes of smoke that filled the air have finally dissipated, and Russian repair crews are assessing the amount of damage that was done in the first strike. But Ukraine has no intention of sitting idly by and allowing Russia to recover. It intends to hit Saky again and again. Harder and more brutally with each subsequent strike, not relenting until the whole base and everything in it has been wiped off the map for good. Because if Saky is so important for the Russians, then it's equally important for Ukraine to raise this airfield to the ground, and to ensure that not a single one of Moscow's jets or bombers is ever allowed to take off from it again. And so as the dust has barely begun to settle from Strike 1, Ukraine's drones take to the skies once more. Once more, the SBU is the brains behind the strike, deploying some of its finest operators and most explosive long-range strike drones, which travel many miles across the occupied regions and into the airspace of the Crimean Peninsula, bypassing Russia's increasingly meager defenses as they go. As with the initial strike, their targets are the various hangars dotted across the base. Russia's commanders may be stubborn, but they're not stupid enough to leave aircraft lying around on runways or open patches of tarmac to be picked off by Ukrainian drones. Instead, all of the enemy's aircraft are tucked away inside these hangars, which provide at least some level of protection. But if Ukraine can blow holes in that protection or even cripple the structural integrity of these hangars and send a few of their tall walls tumbling to the ground, it may at last be able to take out the multi-million-dollar aircraft hiding inside them. That's what this mission is all about. Peel back the protective layers, blow holes in the hangars that Russia relies on to keep its bomber fleet safe. Deal the kind of damage that will pave the way for an even stronger attack next time around. Ensure that Saky is left weaker and harder to defend than it was before. That's the goal, and Ukraine's drone pilots are entirely focused on achieving it. They guide their unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, towards their targets. Russia's depleted defenses fail to stop them as 7 of the drones hit the hangars. Ukrainian intelligence agents later confirmed that 2 of those hangars held some of Russia's best combat aircraft, including Su-30 and Su-30SM fighter jets, valued between $30 and $50 million per plane, depending on its configuration. The Su-30SM in particular is a vital piece of the Kremlin's aerial threat. A heavily upgraded version of the original Su-30 Flanker C, the Su-30SM can carry a weapons payload weighing up to 8,000 kilograms across its 12 external hardpoints. It can reach a peak speed of around 2,120 kilometers per hour and has a combat radius of up to 1,500 kilometers. These technical specifications have allowed this jet and others like it to conduct countless combat operations against Ukrainian towns, cities, and small settlements. Year after year, planes have departed Saky, loaded up with glide bombs and precision missiles, firing their munitions from the relative safety of Crimean airspace and obliterating Ukrainian military targets and civilian infrastructure in regions like Kherson and Zaporizhia. But that isn't going to be allowed to happen anymore. Ukraine's drone crews are going to make sure of it. And while some of the operators celebrate back at base, watching the blazing hangars on their displays, another unit is moving into position in far more dangerous territory, deep behind enemy lines. Chapter 3: Into Enemy Territory. The attacks on Saky Air Base up to this point had been impactful, but had only managed to strike the airfield's infrastructure, the hangars, rather than the planes inside them. It's highly likely that damage was done to some of the aircraft stored at Saky during those strikes, and they still placed the Russians in a difficult position as the base's defenses were slowly but surely being eroded. At the same time, the fleet itself was believed to be mostly intact, and Russia still had the potential to launch devastating strikes on Ukraine from Crimea if it chose to do so. If Kyiv's forces were going to truly put an end to these attacks, they had to adjust their tactics. They had to strike directly at the aircraft themselves. But that was a much more challenging task. Russia kept the planes in the hangars except in the brief moments before conducting combat operations when bombers were moved out onto the runways and prepared for takeoff. Without some sort of continuous surveillance over Saky, Ukrainian forces wouldn't know when these missions were occurring. And even if they knew the date and time of a planned sortie, their drones still needed to travel long distances over the occupied territories and into Crimea. During that time, they would likely be spotted by Russian radars or ground units, who could then send word to Saky that UAVs were on their way, giving their comrades time to move the planes back into the hangars before the attack occurred. With that in mind, the only way to almost ensure a successful strike on a combat aircraft was to launch the drones from behind enemy lines, so they only had to travel a relatively short distance to hit their targets. A perilous mission like this called for the very best of Kyiv's troops. Special Forces combat divers from the National Guard's Omega Special Operations Center, to be exact. The Omega Group, as it's commonly known, is made up of only the finest commandos. Little is known about them or how they operate, apart from the fact that they're the best of the best, and when Ukraine needs to carry out missions that are particularly risky, complex, and important, Omega is who they turned to. As is customary with a special forces unit like this, few details have been released about Omega's operation at Saky. However, it's believed that a team of combat divers were tasked with traveling beyond the front lines, infiltrating the occupied territories, and potentially taking to the waters of the Black Sea itself in order to close the distance on Saky, observe the airbase in order to learn more about how the Russians stationed there were operating, and carry out a surprise strike on an actual aircraft, leaving the enemy without any opportunity to defend itself. And so in the latter weeks of June and into early July, while other Ukrainian drone crews were planning and carrying out their strikes on Saky, Omega divers were already en route towards Crimea. Silently, they moved through the shadows, traveling deep behind enemy lines into increasingly hostile territory. Every day of their journey would have been fraught with danger. Every move they made could have been their last if Russian troops in the area had managed to find them. There were so many things that could have gone wrong as they closed in on their target, all while transporting the UAVs needed to carry out their attack and planning their escape back to Ukraine in order to remain several steps ahead of their enemies. But that's why they were chosen, because they have the unique blend of skills and experience needed to take on the toughest of challenges. And in mid-July, the moment of their ultimate test finally arrived. Chapter 4: The Su-24M Strike. Every day the combat divers spent in and around Crimea put them at increased risk. They couldn't afford to spend too much time so far behind enemy lines, and they knew that if they were spotted or caught, then that would be the end. There would be no rescue mission, no attempt to exfiltrate them, no chance of survival. They would likely be eliminated on the spot or taken in and brutally interrogated by the Russians for information about Ukraine's operations. Still, they pushed on, confident that their end goal was worth the risk they were undertaking to achieve it. They kept close tabs on the airbase from afar, scanning the tarmac for any signs of life, and more importantly, any aircraft that might be being prepared for a bombing run on Ukraine. At last, they saw it, an Su-24M. Otherwise known as the Fencer, this all-weather tactical bomber dates back to the days of the Soviet Union. It entered service in 1974 and soon proved to be one of the Soviets' most important aerial assets. Around 1,400 of these planes were subsequently produced, with some being shipped out to other countries and many being used in conflicts such as the Soviet-Afghan War, the First and Second Chechen Wars, and the Syrian Civil War. Boasting dual Lyulka turbojet engines, the Su-24M can reach peak speeds of around Mach 1.35 or over 1,000 miles per hour. It sports 8 external hardpoints and the capacity to carry thousands of pounds of bombs, along with a 6-barrel rotary cannon and numerous rocket pods for air-to-air encounters. It is a vital, valuable asset of the Russian aerospace forces and a high-priority target for Ukraine, which has succeeded in destroying over a dozen of these aircraft since the war began. Spying the Su-24M on the tarmac, the combat divers knew this was an opportunity they couldn't afford to let slip. Fortunately, they had the perfect tools for the job: Hornet drones. Manufactured by the US company Swiftbeat and costing around $10,000 to $11,000 per unit, these attack drones were specifically made to destroy enemy equipment and vehicles, and Ukraine has used them to great effect in recent times. Featuring an airframe made of expanded polypropylene and carbon fiber components, a 300 kV motor and 10,000 mAh battery, a pneumatic catapult launch system, and both internal and satellite navigation systems to help find its target, the Hornet is a highly effective piece of UAV technology. It carries shaped fragmentation warheads designed to detonate on impact and also features 2 daytime cameras to help it locate its targets and aid with navigation. On top of this, the Hornet also boasts an AI brain, which it uses to home in on its targets during the final stage of its flight, so it doesn't even need to be manually guided to collide with whatever enemy asset it's about to annihilate. These features made the Hornet the ideal choice for Ukraine's combat divers. Using a pneumatic catapult launch system, they fired a couple of these drones into the air. Instantly, the Hornet's non-standard radio frequency communications kicked in, effectively making it almost impossible for the enemy's electronic warfare systems to detect or disturb. The divers guided it towards the air base before allowing the AI navigation to take over. Thanks to this, they were already likely leaving the area when the Hornets closed in on the Su-24M, belonging to the 43rd Independent Naval Assault Aviation Regiment of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Video footage and a detailed mission report from the National Guard commander Alexander Pivnenko revealed that the first drone struck the plane's nose before it could take off or be hidden in a nearby hangar. The second UAV then moved in for the kill, targeting the Su-24M's fuel tank area and sending the entire plane up in flames. The strike was swift and brutal, taking the Russians completely by surprise and giving them zero opportunity to react or respond. From there, the divers' mission impossible continued, as they now had to escape occupied territory without being seen. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. The Hornet drone has a maximum flight range of between 130 and 160 kilometers, meaning that the combat divers must have been within such a distance of the Saky Air Base when the strike occurred. Even if they were the maximum distance away, that would still put them several miles behind enemy lines at the time of the attack, with alerts sounding out and Russian troops being told to watch out for covert Ukrainian forces operating in the area. If the divers' journey into Crimea was perilous, their journey back out of the region was even more dangerous, since the Russians were likely now aware of their presence. Again, they had to rely on all of their skills, training, and experience to remain calm in the face of extreme danger and escape this life-or-death situation. Somehow, against the odds, they succeeded. Reports state that the divers managed to make it back to Ukrainian-held territory, putting the perfect finishing touch on a thoroughly successful strike operation. An Su-24M had been eliminated. Russia had lost yet another piece of its bombing fleet. More importantly, Ukraine's special operatives had sent a clear message to their enemy. They had proven that the occupied territories were no longer safe for the Russian military to reside in. They had shown that even locations more than 100 miles from the front lines could be targeted at any time, and that even when Russian forces thought they had a bit of breathing room, Ukrainian divers or other special forces soldiers could quite easily be watching them, hidden on the horizon or nestled in the shadows, just waiting for them to make another mistake, biding their time for the right moment to strike and weaken their opponent yet again. We'll see you on the next battlefield.